Good afternoon to you. Mark Sutton with HurricaneTrack.com here. It's Tuesday, the 5th day of September now. A couple of things to let you know. First of all, I'm good. I'm fine. You might have been wondering where I've been lately. I am actually at the New Bern Hospital here, New Bern, North Carolina, where my father is. He's not doing very well, so the family has gathered for that. We're set up in a few rooms here where we can be with him, and I can do a little bit of work. Obviously, the main attention is on him, but he's comfortable right now, so I've got a little bit of time to focus on what he basically got me into many, many decades ago. I credit my affection for the weather and all things related to nature and science mostly to my father. So that's where I am. But hurricane season is still ongoing, and we've got a powerful hurricane that's going to develop in the southwest Atlantic, and there will be impacts. Okay, whether or not this makes landfall, we're too focused on that. We need to focus on what to expect, not what category it's going to be or necessarily where it's going to go. Those are important, but more important are impacts. What can you expect? All right, so let's get into that, and let's see what's happening out there. First of all, this El Nino really, it's pretty robust, but it's not what it looked like it could be. There it is in the tropical Pacific, butting up against the very warm tropical Atlantic through here. But also, isn't it interesting, this is the cold wake left from Franklin, and just a little bit of a cold wake right there left from Idalia. So depending on what future Lee, which is located out here somewhere, where it tracks over the coming days through this region, perhaps somewhere in there, it might encounter that cold wake left from Franklin. But yeah, the El Nino really not having much of a substantial influence over the Atlantic in terms of just keeping everything down. We can see that reflected in the Southern Oscillation Index, the last 30-day, or the 30-day running average. That's in El Nino territory. The number is there at -10. Normally we think about -7 and lower as being where the atmosphere and the ocean are kind of coupled up, El Nino thresholds, but the 90-day average, which is a better measure, a measuring stick, if you will, at only -5, so we're short of that -7, and I think the El Nino is not going to be as robust. It's clear. It's already September, and we're up to our 13th named storm or something like that, or pretty close to it, and it's going to be a pretty powerful hurricane, and we've got much, much more coming after this. All right, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I'm just telling you, this is what I look at, and this is what I see. There's TD13. This will eventually be Tropical Storm Lee, L-E-E, not hard to pronounce that one, and eventually a powerful hurricane in the Atlantic. And then another tropical wave coming off with the lack of deep ridging out over this part of the Atlantic right now. That's really not there. This system is going to curve up and out, but we're going to have to watch what happens with 13. A lot of confidence out there from people willing to bet the coastline, that what will be Lee is going to comfortably recurve. All we have to do is think back 2018 with Florence. It's a different setup, I understand, but you don't just, nobody knows for sure. And it's really funny to see the hubris, just like anybody that says it is coming. And yes, there's some social media shenanigans, but the truth is we don't know. The pattern can change, and that's what we're going to talk about. We'll get to it. But the future of Lee, and the future of it, it's not set in stone yet. It never is, right? Even Idalia, those last few hours before landfall, is it going to be near St. Mark's, Florida? Or is it going to be near Cedar Key? Ian last year, that last day, is it going to be Tampa, and it ended up being Fort Myers in vicinity, right? Come on, we have to remember how this stuff works, and the atmosphere is always changing and evolving. And a week to 10 days out, there is absolutely no certainty here, except the closest certainty that we do have, if that makes any sense, is that we're going to have a very powerful hurricane in the southwest Atlantic. It is forecast to become a major hurricane, and we can see that reflected in the discussion all the way up to 140 miles per hour. That is an aggressive forecast because the model guidance is really honing in on this becoming quite a powerful hurricane over the Atlantic. And there it is, a huge area of energy. It's got that S shape to it, and it is going to wrap up and become a very strong hurricane with an ideal environment. And the El Nino, the wind shear that we were hoping would cut across and just roll everything up, not going to be the case. Then, by the way, this is the leftovers, I guess this is leftovers of Idalia. Big, powerful extratropical system up there. All sorts of other little features swirling around. Just lots and lots of energy in the North Atlantic. And this is what's helped to knock down the ridging to a great extent. That's a big part of it. Without these cyclones up here, I think Lee would be destined to just go right through the islands, probably towards the Gulf. But all this traffic, as we say, up in the Atlantic here, carves away that big dome of air. And so it allows what will be Lee to gain latitude faster than it gains longitude eventually. And then right here we do have another system. I think this is 96L, if I'm not mistaken, and that'll go on to develop. Not sure what this is all about. I didn't even really look into it, to be honest with you, but anytime you've got deep thunderstorms over warm waters in September, you watch it and you see what might come of it. I'm not too concerned with it. The big story, of course, will be Lee, eventually Lee. This is TD13 right now, but look at it. It's already starting to come together. The outflow is absolutely well established, tremendous inflow into the system. It is still trying to consolidate. It's in its infancy, but it will come together and it will be a very strong hurricane, almost certainly. It's just one of those things. You just know the model guidance is definitely pointing in that direction. Now, we talked about anomalies over here at the first part of this, and by the way, those anomalies all across the area here, still pretty deep. It's just this one corridor that future Lee will have to traverse. Depending on how far east it makes the turn, it is going to turn around the periphery of whatever high pressure is out here. But when that happens will determine how much of this cold wake that it encounters. And remember, these are just cooler than average. Substantially so, 2 degrees Celsius maybe. So, it could weaken it a little bit, but we'll see. What if it scoots more to the west and misses this? Or it's more to the east? We'll have to see. So, just something to keep in mind. But the actual sea surface temperatures, just checking in on that, it's been a while. Still pretty warm over the western Atlantic. It's very hot here in the Carolinas today, 90s. Going to be in the 90s the next few days. As strong high pressure is building back in. So water temperatures are not really going to go anywhere anytime soon, drastic up or down. So what you see is what you get. And we do have to watch this right up through here, and I'll show you why. Lee, future Lee, doesn't necessarily have to recurve. And let me just make that point clear. Again, people posting, it should recurve. I mean, I see what they're saying, and I'm nitpicking, I get it, but why should it? There's nothing that says these things need to do what we think they're going to do. The atmosphere is made up of high pressure and low pressure. It's fluid. It interacts with each other, all these different pieces of this atmospheric puzzle, and we don't know how they're going to fit together. We just don't. But if Lee gains this latitude over here far enough west, you got this corridor here where the water temperatures are pretty warm, 28, 29 Celsius, pretty far to the north. And if we go back and look at the anomalies, there's this one little zone right here, and that's a pretty wide area that Lee could cross eventually, whether we're talking about potentially impacting New England directly or indirectly, maybe the Canadian Maritimes. This is way out, but those are things we need to be looking at as potential either roadblocks with the blue area or potential enhancements with the anomalies that are on the positive side. All right. Now, in the Gulf, this is what our Hurricane Idalia did, but it's still very, very warm in the Gulf of Mexico. In fact, a lot of the higher water temperature values are now into the western Gulf for the most part. The season is far from over. We still have later in September into October when we normally get the Central American gyre that sets up. It kind of set up a little bit there and gave us Idalia, kind of a monsoon trough gyre situation, just a large circulating area cyclonically in the different basins of the world. And this one happened to set up and gave us Idalia. Now that's typically more something we see later in September. And with all that warmth still there, don't let your guard down yet, folks. It's not over. Just letting you know, all right? We get, I think, too worked up sometimes that just news is just news. It doesn't have to be bad or good, just telling you how it is, all right? So, GFS, let's use blue here to mark things up. There's the vorticity signature for Lee right there, or I say leak. It's pretty much destined to be that, right? And it kind of looks like a Picasso painting or something, or a skull or whatever. It looks like a nose right there and these eyes. Yikes. Anyway, told you the atmosphere is funky. These are the puzzle pieces. So let's just watch right here. And this is the low level. By the way, this is down at 5,000 feet, 850 millibars. We're going to switch around in a few minutes, and I'll show you different levels of the atmosphere, layers of the atmosphere. So soon to be Lee gets going, starts heading west-northwest to northwest, and then it curves. Oh, we're too far out. See, I've goofed up already. I want to stop at 168. And the reason is that's how far the Hurricane Center forecast goes. Anything beyond that is, I mean, come on, even the 7-day forecast has got a huge error, right? It could be way to the north, it could be south, it could be east, it could be west. But this is the 7-day GFS operational, and it puts Lee in the southwest Atlantic as a powerful hurricane. How do I know that? Well, there's different parameters of the atmosphere that we can look at. Let's scroll down just a little bit, look at the lower dynamics. And let's just look at, mean sea level pressure and 10-meter wind. Yep, 947 millibars on the GFS. That'll do it. So the number one thing this is going to do, well before this time frame, by the way, it's going to generate swells that will impact the islands. That includes the Bahamas, and then eventually the entirety of the east coast of North America. That will be a very big impact. This is going to be a powerful hurricane unless something comes along that we're not seeing right now. And the swells from this are going to be bigger than the ones from Franklin, more than likely. Surfers, you're going to really, really enjoy this. But it's going to be very dangerous for swimmers at the coast. It's going to create rough surf conditions. This is coming. An impact from future Lee that we need to take into consideration. Beyond that, we don't know. We're going to have to just wait and see. This is 1 week out, just another part of the atmosphere I want to show you. A couple of keys to the game, so to speak. I don't particularly love that terminology because it's not a game, but I think you understand what I'm saying here. So the 500 millibar height anomaly, this is about 20,000 feet in the atmosphere. Lee will be very deep, and so it's going to fill up the atmosphere and be influenced by deep layer features. This is a huge block of air, if you will, anomalously so, thicker than normal, and that's what this anomaly gradient shows. And this is lower pressure in the atmosphere. This is your trough. The key is going to be where this trough is. If it's less pronounced, if it's more west, if it becomes negatively tilted, this starts to grow more, Lee comes more west, and we can have a problem for the East Coast. And it's really easy. That's one scenario. The other scenario, I say it's really easy, is the trough is deeper, stronger, farther east, and Lee gets kicked out closer to Bermuda, and maybe it just skirts by and misses everybody. But it is absolutely not a guarantee that we get away without Lee making landfall somewhere in North America. The islands, it looks really, really good for direct impacts. However, the bands coming by, depending on how deep this gets, the big inflow bands that it creates, these feeder bands, there could be some gusty winds and heavy rain. We got to watch this closely and not focus on the hurricane itself, the would-be hurricane in the future. Again, think about impacts. And the first thing will be the swells, and then we just need to see how does the pattern evolve. And we don't know. And I know you can look at the GFS beyond this. That's fine. But 168 hours is as far as the Hurricane Center goes. Why even worry about it? All right, so the European, this is the EC Fast off of Dr. Cowan's site. This right here would be our depression. And let's just move this out. Make sure we refresh this so we have the latest frames. And so we have this out to a week. Perfect. So move this along, and Lee skirts north of the islands fairly comfortably and starts to slow down there. And that gives me, this is what I'm talking about. So look at the difference. 168 hours out, Lee is north of Puerto Rico on the euro, and let's go look and see where it is. I've got to line these up on the GFS, and that'll really help us to kind of understand the positioning here. It's got to get everything matched up. Da-da-da. All right, so 168 on the euro, versus 168 on the GFS. So the euro is a little bit farther south and southeast, meaning that it is slower. All right, and so we have to see, usually when these things slow down, that means something's going to happen. And what I'm a little concerned about is, does it slow down and then another trough digs in, pulls it out, and we're good? Or does it slow down in time for that little troughing we saw on the GFS over here to lift out, the ridge builds over the top, this starts to gain longitude, and then curves too late to miss everybody or whatever? I'm just telling you, I mean, I've done this long enough. You never write it off. You get these early model runs, the thing's not even developed yet, and people go hang their hat, and they plant their flag. It's going to do this, it's going to do that, and we just don't know. So what I need you to do is just pay attention. That's it. Just need you to pay attention, because again, looking at our interactive map here, just get an idea of the size of this and the influence it's going to have. Category 4 hurricane sitting out over the southwest Atlantic. And the first thing, like I said, is going to be those swells that will eventually reach all of these land areas through here. That's a tremendous amount of real estate that's going to be impacted. Now listen, we don't want to ignore the Pacific, so while we're here, we do have Tropical Storm Hova, and yes, that will also create some impacts indirectly for our friends in Mexico up along the Baja, mainly, of course, from swells, because this is forecast to become a Category 3 out over the eastern Pacific. So we're going to be watching Lee very closely. Again, I'm at the hospital with family and my father, and that will all resolve itself. I already will tell you I appreciate the thoughts and prayers from everybody and just the good wishes. I figured, you know what? We're friends. You know me through this. It's a asymmetrical relationship, as a good friend of mine coins it, because more of you know me and about me than I do about you, but life happens, and the end of life comes for loved ones eventually, and we're dealing with that. And yet, like I said, him giving me that early knowledge of science and weather, that's why I'm here. It really is. So trying to put that on to you and educate you about what I'm seeing out there and what I'm watching, and we'll stay on top of it, all right? Thanks, as always, for tuning in. I do appreciate it. Good to be back with you here to upload this for you. I'm Mark Stott with HurricaneTrack.com. From all of us here, I'll be back with more for you tomorrow.